So you're seeing our videos and you're ready to buy E-Click, but then you go to the website and you're a little overwhelmed by all the options. Stock live valve, Fox Ray series shocks, what springs do you have? And you're like, wait, do I need springs? There are a lot of options with the E-Click system and it can be a little bit overwhelming. In this video, we're gonna cover all the options available with the SDI E-Click system and how they apply to the different generations of the Ford Raptor. We're also gonna show you how you should plan your build to integrate the SDI E-Click system into it. And then my recommendations to get the most out of the system and get the most bang for your buck. I'm Helio with Keep It Dirty Off-Road, and this channel is all about DIY content as we work on our Raptor, bring you guys along for our off-road adventures, and share all of our lessons learned along the way. Make sure you guys stay tuned for the end of the video. We got a special offer for you guys from Hammer Built on the SDI E-Click system. E-Click really gives you the best of both worlds. A cush ride on pavement while also tapping into your truck's full potential off-road. Before the E-Click system came out, and honestly before live valves came out, off-road suspension was always a compromise between utility over comfort. We all know the stock suspension on our Raptors is really tuned for on-road performance with some off-roading. In off-road, it's very easy to find the limits of the truck's stock suspension. Whether you're bouncing or bucking when you're hitting certain obstacles, when you're hitting a wash and bottoming out, if you've ever found the limits of your stock suspension, you can understand why people spend thousands of dollars on mid-travel and long travel with race-tuned shocks. But at the end of the day, a proper off-road suspension is built with firmer valving, stiffer springs to more effectively absorb the higher loads we experience off-road. That often leaves us with a much stiffer, rougher ride on pavement. I have an SVC mid-travel truck. This truck is amazing off-road. It's extremely capable. I love this truck. The front end is coilovers with a bypass shock on each corner and then bypass shocks and bump stops in the back. Extremely capable off-road, but on-road, she can be a little annoying. She definitely does ride a little rough on pavement. It don't even get me started on the turn radius in this thing. Parking her and doing U-turns are quite a chore because of the off-road suspension. SDI's E-Click system really is the next evolution of off-road suspension. Using SDI's advanced ECUs, an 8-axis sensor, a bunch of inputs from the truck such as throttle response, braking, and so on, and SDI's unique algorithm, E-Click takes over control of the live valve shocks and does adjustments 500 times per second, way better than stock Gen 2 performance and stock Gen 3 performance, allowing the shocks to really adapt instantly to ever-changing trail conditions. And the system is constantly actively softening and stiffening to give you the most possible smooth ride on the trails while also compensating for the obstacles you hit there. And it improves it on road too. On road, you get a very smooth ride, and when you really get on it, it gives you a nice flat ride with very little body roll. But at the same token, it's able to stiffen up when you need it when you're on the trails. We have a ton of videos on how the E-Click system works, so make sure you guys check out this playlist right here or here of all the testing we've done with the E-Click system. It truly is capable, and I highly recommend you guys check it out. Now, before you start your E-Click build, you do need to do some planning ahead of time. SDI built the E-Click solution with multiple algorithms to take into account the different and typical upgrades that most people do on their Raptors to give you the best performance based on your specific configuration. And they look at things like, do you have the stock live valve shocks? Do you have race series shocks? From now on, we're going to call FRS shocks. Do you have spring upgrades up front? Are you running the iBox, geysers? Are you running a spacer? And then finally, are you running revalve shocks? SDI gives you the option to do a revalve live valve shock that really takes the full capability of the shock. Now, there are different algorithms that are applied based on your configuration. Currently, that algorithm can only be changed at the factory at SDI and Lake Elsinore. If down the road you decide to change to SDI tuned shocks, you need to send your ECU to SDI to reprogram. But overall, there are two algorithms. Are you on factory stock shocks, or have your shocks been revalved and tuned by SDI? If you're stock and upgrade the top hat or add a spacer later on, you'll be fine. But if you upgrade to SDI revalve shocks, you need to get your ECU updated to match. So we always recommend plan your build ahead of time and try to do everything either ahead of the SDI E-Click installation or with the SDI E-Click installation. Before we get into my recommendations, we have to go over something that I go over in all my videos, and that is you have to be honest with yourself on how you plan to use the truck. Is this your daily driver truck? You take this to work every day? Do you work with your truck? Do you only occasionally go off-road? Or do you want to be more off-road focused and have this thing tap into the truck's full potential? There really is no wrong answer here. If you commute with your truck and you want to maintain that nice soft ride that you get from the factory, it's probably not a good idea to really go overboard and spend thousands of dollars on upgrades that are going to make the ride stiffer. Because yes, spring upgrades do make the truck stiffer. Doesn't matter if it's the springs up front or the leaf pack out back. If your Raptor is your toy, don't skimp on upgrades. If you like to go fast, you like to take jumps, you take more risk and drive more aggressively, you want a suspension solution with some extra headroom and capabilities. So again, be honest with yourself here. If it's your daily driver and you want to preserve that cush ride, keep it stock. Or are you the adrenaline junkie and need something more capable? So let's start getting into the recommendations. I'm gonna go into a couple different options, and again, it's gonna be based on how you want your build to go. Whether or not you wanna be more of a cush ride and keep it as soft as possible, or you wanna build it as a toy or sacrifice a little bit of the ride comfort. So on the Gen 2 platform, for the guy that wants to keep the cush ride, keep it as soft as possible, but also gain that extra capability they want off-road, you want to keep that suspension stock. Yes, you heard that right. Stock live valves, both front and rear, and stock springs, both front and rear, to give you the softest ride. The stock springs is the only way to maintain an extremely smooth ride on these trucks on pavement. As soon as you start changing those, you get a rougher ride. And it's also gonna be the least amount of downtime because you just have to install the new live valve system and you're ready to go, and you're gonna add a ton of capability to the truck. Now, there are some of you guys that want to look at doing a level look. Want to raise that front end a little bit, which is not a bad idea to keep it out of trouble for those few times you do go off-road. If you want a level look, avoid springs. You want to stick with the collar, and that collar should be limited to 1.5 to 2 inches max. And I actually recommend the SDI top hat replacement, and I'll cover why later on in this video. 1.5 to 2 inches is really the max you want to do to maintain a smooth ride while also raising that front end with the least amount of issues. Eventually your rear springs are going to start to go flat and that back end is going to go low, so don't go too much here, because if your priority is soft ride, you want to keep those stock soft springs. The alternative, aftermarket leaf packs, you are in for a rough ride if you go that route. Now, quick clarification on the leaf pack. Compared to stock, they will be stiffer. And it's unavoidable considering the amount of leaves that get added compared to stock. But when you first put them on, they're gonna be even more stiffer, and it takes a lot of force to break them in. You're not gonna break them in on the road. Driving on the road, it's not gonna happen. They will require articulation on the trails, full cycles where they're allowed to move completely and articulate completely. When I had my 2017, it took the leaf packs on those a few hard SoCal off-road runs before they even came close to softening them up. But don't expect to upgrade the leaf pack for a smoother ride, because initially it'll be much stiffer, and when they do break in, they will be softer, but the softest option for the most cush ride is still stock leaf packs. For the off-roader on the Gen 2, my recommendation has evolved over the years. If you watch some of my earlier videos, I said go springs to get the most capability of the truck. But after seeing what springs do and how rough that ride can get, and seeing what a system like this can do, my recommendations have changed. And in fact, for somebody that wants to do more off-roading with their truck and is okay with a slightly harsher ride, I don't recommend springs anymore, and I do recommend going with the SDI top hat replacement that changes the top hat of the shock, removes that really weak, thin metal top hat, replaces it with theirs that also has additional height, 1.75 inches over stock. And then I also recommend that you send your shocks to SDI to revalve them so that they're at their max potential. For the back end, I'd recommend also replacing the springs, going with either Devers +3 or going with the icons. Now, I do recommend the icons over the Devers because the icons give you the capability to change your mind down the road, right? They come with the add leaf so you can change your mind. That'll stiffen up the back end. And again, combined with SDI's revalving, it's gonna give you the most possible suspension performance out of that truck. Guys running with the top hat replacement out front, leaf pack in the back with the SDI E-Click and the revalve shocks, most of those guys are able to keep up with mid-travel trucks. It's a very impressive setup. This option is obviously a more costly option because you're dealing with the E-Click system plus the top hat plus leaf spec in the back, and it also is going to be most downtime too because all of that has to be installed, and then you have to send your shocks into SDI to revalve, so you have to be ready to store your truck without its shocks. Now, SDI does offer an exchange program for your stock shocks. They will exchange your shocks for an already rebuilt and revalved SDI shock that has been refreshed already, and SDI can turn that around in 24 hours. But if your shocks are in bad shape, like they have rusting, they have any kind of damage, SDI will evaluate your shocks and attempt to rebuild your shocks. Just keep in mind that depending on the damage, you may need to cover some additional parts costs that may come when they do the actual rebuild of the shock. Turnaround time for rebuild shocks is around 5 business days or about a week. But SDI's revalving is by far one of the best and most worthwhile bargains out there, period. SDI basically rebuilds the shocks with new seals, does their magic to change the shocks, and with their dyno and their trail tested valving, they get the most performance out of the shocks. They also add unique oil specifically designed to get the most performance out of the active valves, and a rebuild and tune session will cost you so much more. So I highly recommend going with SDI's revalving because of the rebuild and the valving and all the changes they make to the shock really tap the most potential out of that package. One of the reasons here I picked the top hat replacement is there is a weak point in the Gen 2 trucks and the Gen 3 trucks with live valves. We're going to talk about this later on in the video, so make sure you stay tuned for that and we'll give you guys more details. For the Gen 3 Raptor, my recommendations are a little bit different because that is a different platform with a different rear end. The front end is basically the same as before, so my recommendations don't change there. If you want to be more of the daily driver with occasional off-roading, keep it stock. Again, keep it stock. It's going to give smoothest ride, both front and rear, stock springs, stock everything, but add the SDI E-Click system. That'll give you the capability you need for the occasional off-roader while giving you that cush ride you want when you're not on the trails. Again, if you want to raise the front a little bit, look at collars. Optimum is the SDI top hat replacement with the 1.75 inch extra height. For the off-roader, my recommendations for the front are the same. Look at the top hat replacement from SDI to give you that extra height you need, and then look at SDI's revalve options for all 4 corners of the shocks. Quick note here on the Gen 3 shocks. We do recommend that you perform more checks on your Gen 3 shocks than any other platform. We have seen reports of the shock body separating from the axle caps on both sides. It's a very subtle thing, but make sure you're checking your shocks and working with Ford to warranty those shocks that are coming loose prior to installing E-Click. And honestly, you should be adding it to your regular checks anyways, but make sure you check them out because when that does fail, your only option is to have it warranted by Ford. At the time of making this video, there's not too many options in the back to really upgrade the back. You could look at springs in the back, but honestly, the stock springs aren't too bad for what you want to do, and the truck will perform really good with stock springs in the back. You really don't need to go crazy on the Gen 3 if you want to have a capable truck. Especially these days, I'm not too big of a fan of doing geysers anymore, and I'll tell you why. A lot of you guys may be asking, what about spring upgrades and FRS shocks? I personally don't recommend spring upgrades on live valve shocks anymore. I stopped recommending it in 2021 based on my experiences with the 2020 Raptor with the iBox, and we've seen too many guys running the stock live valve shocks with iBox and geysers have problems, and that's without E-Click. Ride is very compromised and stiff. Don't care what anybody says here. I've ran both geysers on my 2017 and then iBox on my 2020. They are both very stiff. We have seen in some rare instances when pushed to the limits, folks actually started to crack their shock buckets with this combination. It happened to my 2020 Gen 2 with iBox. It started to crack on the face of the frame. And we've seen plenty of others have the same issue. And I've seen plenty of 19 to 20 Gen 2s with geysers crack the top of their shock buckets, with rare instances breaking through after a few situations where the maximum stiffness was required. But the most common issue with upgraded springs and stock shocks is the shock separating from the top hat and causing catastrophic failure when the suspension was allowed to droop too much. Check out these clips from EXO that explains what happened.
And we got a boo-boo.
Out of a shock hat, stock shocks.
It's the 9th time we've seen this happen. Every single time it's progressive front coils, either iBox or geyser.
Well, we're having fun.
Yes, we're having fun. Anyways, if you plan on off-roading, do not recommend getting these progressive front coils because this seems to happen every time if you actually off-road with it. So
this was a doozy. This happened due to 2 factors. First being what I believe is the weak design for the connection between the shock shaft and shock hat on the stock Ford Raptor shocks. combined with a secondary factor of an aftermarket progressive coil that creates too much downward pressure, causing the shaft to separate from the shock hat. Once that happens, the shock is no longer limiting down travel, putting way too much stress on the upper control arm ball joint, which eventually will fail and can lead to the catastrophic result that we see here. This is by far the worst that we have seen, but this is the 13th failure we have seen in our runs of the connection between the shock shaft and hat, all of them running progressive front coils with stock shocks. How to prevent this? Go get yourself a limit strap. SVC Off-Road is currently in development of this product.
Now what's going on here, guys, is the combination of stiffer springs with the live valve shock at its maximum stiffness when it's preparing for an obstacle like hitting a surprise wash or something at speed is more than the sheet metal top hat can handle. And no, stock springs with the 2-inch collar have not caused this issue that you guys saw in the EXO video. This is isolated to upgraded springs because the stock springs, even preloaded, allow the shock bump zone at the end of the stroke to dampen the load before it actually hits the shock bucket. The most common failure is this collar at the top of the top hat that fails and disconnects, and it allows the shock to come loose, and then that in turn allows the suspension to go full droop too much to the point that it collapses. EXO recommends limiting straps to help keep the suspension from falling apart when it fails, and limiting damage. But it does not fix the root cause here, which is the aftermarket springs and the live valve at its maximum stiffness when they detect full droop and prepare to hit an obstacle by setting themselves for the maximum stiffness. And all that full force of the impact gets communicated all the way up to the shock bucket because the coils bind up and don't allow the shock to hit the bump zone at the top of the shock. And again, this is limited to just coil spring upgrades because of all the extra coils they add compared to stock, and it doesn't allow the bump zone of the shock to work. So you get the full load of the impact that's not dampened correctly that gets transferred completely to the shock bucket, and it's more than the shock bucket top hat and bucket can handle. So those are the reason why we recommend the SDI top hat over the stock one, because it replaces this very thin and punched piece with a full billet aluminum piece. It gets rid of this really weak collar right here that is known to fail and replaces it with a machine piece with proper rubber bushing. It also adds additional support and strength to the top of the shock bucket, so you reinforce your shock bucket and get a stronger top hat. You will prevent the shocks from separating from the top hat. You also keep the stock springs, keeping the ride smoother and less likely to have a failure like you saw on the EXO video. The SDI top hat, though, is also a much better approach when it comes to preloading your suspension and getting more height. Your typical collar just preloads the shocks and you lose all that up travel. If you preload an inch, you gain about 2 inches of height, but you lose about 2 inches of up travel. SDI's top hat, on the other hand, is a combination of a spacer and a collar to preload the suspension. This top half is a spacer and the bottom half works as a collar. So you keep more of the full travel of the stock shock. With the SDI bucket, the 10mm preload with the spacer gives you 1.75 inches of height, but you're only losing about 3/4 inches of up travel. So the shock is allowed to articulate fully with the stock spring, and you don't lose the bump zone at the top of the shock. SDI top head replacement has really been our recommendation going forward because of all the extra strength this adds. Now, alternately, you can use collars over springs. Just max them out the height to no more than 2 inches over stock. 1.5 to 2 inches is really the max you want to do. Any more and you will reduce the life of your CV axle boots. Now, let me show you what I'm talking about here with CV boots. Don't mind the cobwebs. So this right here are my CV boots. And what happens when you preload the suspension, you go from having the suspension like this to having it like that. And the more that these folds touch as the suspension is articulating, the faster they will wear out. So this is one of the reasons why you want to limit your preload to no more than 2 inches. And ideally, 1.5, 1.75 is the max you should go so that these don't rub up on each other and fail prematurely. As those folds make contact, they start to wear out. Now, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen instantly, but the CV boots are going to go from lasting 100,000 miles or so to lasting as little as 5,000 miles with heavy four-wheel drive use and a high angle. On my 2017 with Geysers, both of my CV boots failed within 10,000 miles of installing the Geyser springs. Both boots on both sides of the trucks failed within a week of each other. Don't combine spring upgrades with collars or even the top hat replacement. Just don't do it. I don't know why I have to say this, but many people have asked me, I've seen this on the forums, And I just don't understand why somebody wants to do that much extra height up front. Why would you need 3 to 4 inches of extra height up front? I mean, you're just gonna preload the shocks, and all that extra height you add is up travel that you're gonna lose on the suspension. On top of that, it's extremely stiff, and you're gonna have more issues, and it's gonna be an even stiffer ride off-road, and it's guaranteed to destroy your suspension. Your axles, your ball joints, all that stuff's gonna get destroyed. So don't do it, guys. It's either one or the other. It's never both. Never both. A lot of you guys may be asking, why not Fox Race Series shocks? FRS. And honestly, it comes down to the rear race shocks. The rear FRS shocks have a one-way check valve that actually slows them down substantially. If you've ever looked at those, they have that dual recirculating reservoir design, and in between them, there's a check valve that doesn't allow the oil to flow in both directions. They're just slower, even with the SDI tune and the SDI algorithm doing their thing. We saw this a lot on our testing. The stock live valve truck with the SDI E-Click actually outperformed the FRS shocks with live valve and the E-Click system. I want to caveat that here because we did see the FRS live valves come alive at higher speeds, 60, 65, 70 miles an hour. They really came alive and really started performing well. They also faded less at those speeds. But at the lower speeds, the check valve limits the performance, so we were not getting consistent results. The performance at 40, 50, 55 wasn't the same as 60, 65, 70. The stock live valves perform good at any speed, and the FRS shocks require you to be going much faster for them to really wake up. The front FRS shocks, the coilovers, they're definitely an improvement over the stock ones because they have that adjustable collar, so you could really compress and preload that suspension however you want. The problem is that you can't mix and match suspension. You can't have an FRS coilover in the front with a stock live valve in the back. You gotta have that symmetry. You gotta have the same shocks for the algorithm and everything else to work correctly. And this goes back to what I always said, right? You need balance. When you're doing your truck, you gotta have balance. Now, if you already have the FRS live valves, you don't have to go back to stock. You're still gonna be very happy with what the FRS live valves can do. This is more for the budget-minded guys that are looking to upgrade their truck and trying to get the most performance. And the most performance you can get out of this truck will really come down to the Fox live valves with the SDI tune, and the E-Click system is really gonna give you the most out of the truck, and it's gonna give you the most consistent ride, whether you're going slow, medium, or fast. Now you know how your truck's gonna be configured and you're finally ready to order. Before you order, you need to make sure you document your expected configuration when you install the E-Click system. Are you running springs? Are you running collars? Are you running stock live valves? FRS live valves, that kind of stuff. And then you want to pick your kit, and the kit's really going to depend on your truck. If you have a 19 to 20 Raptor, those already come with live valves. There's a 17 to 18 kit for those that don't have live valves. There's a Gen 3 kit, and then there's a Gen 1 kit that's also a universal F-150 kit for non-Raptor guys that want to do Raptor swaps. First off, let's start off with the most common kit, which is the 19 to 20 Gen 2 Raptor kit. Kit retails for $17.99. You pick your shock setup, whether you're stock or Fox Race Series. Pick whether or not it's revalved or not. Just keep in mind, revalve is an additional cost. If you want them revalved, you have to select that option as well separately, and then you'll need to be able to ship your shocks back to SDI in Lake Elsinore so that they can revalve them for you. Next, you pick your front springs. I hope you guys are doing collars over springs, but again, I warned you guys. If you're running the SDI bucket, the top hat replacement, make sure you select collar because it's the same thing. And then finally, all the kits will have the option to add the new light integration control system. We've showed you guys that on the Gen 3 video. If you guys want to take a look at that video here, it's a pretty cool little option to add additional auxiliary light controls on your E-Click panel, which is pretty cool. The next kit up that's going to be probably the most common would be the Gen 3 kit for 21 to 23 Raptors with a single live valve setup. This kit costs $2,100. Now, there's not that many options for the kit at the time of this video, right? Because there's not that many upgrade options. At the making of this video, there's still no FRS live valve shocks that are specific for the Gen 3, and that's key. You know, you want to wait to the ones that are specific. I know there's guys out there trying to run Gen 2 live valves in the Gen 3 successfully, but again, you want to wait for the Gen 3. It's a link truck. You want to get the proper shocks. Here, the main option is going to be, do you want revalved or not? Again, keep in mind, revalve is an additional cost. And then you want to select your spring setup up front, whether you're using stock, upgraded springs, or a collar. And then finally, the optional light integration control. For those guys that don't have live valves, you can retrofit your trucks with the system. SDI E-Click makes a 17 to 18 Raptor kit. It costs $2,100. $2,100. It includes all the solenoids, all the cabling, and everything you would need to retrofit your truck to run live valves. Most times when you get takeoff shocks, they don't come with solenoids, so the kit includes the solenoids there so that you can get takeoff shocks, or you can get race series live valve shocks and put them on the truck and be able to run E-Click live valves on your system. Same thing as the stock Gen 2, you need to make sure you pick what kind of shocks you're running, FRS or OEM. You need to check if you're valving them or not. Again, revalve is an additional cost, and then your line integration control. And then finally we get to the kit that I'm most interested in, and it's the Gen 1 kit. Yes, if you run a Gen 1, you can run live valves on your truck and really wake up that truck. And this also applies to F-150s, Raptor swap suspension with live valves. You can order this kit. It'll come with all the cabling, all the solenoids and everything like that, just like the non-live valve kit. You do the similar selections before. Just keep in mind that in order to run this kit, you do have to replace the front shock bucket. You have to replace it so that the stock live valve shocks or the FRS live valve shocks from the Gen 2 will fit. There's no way to fit those shocks in there and have them perform correctly on the stock location. The stroke is just not there. The lower shock bucket is designed for a much shorter stroke on the shock, so you need to replace it. And if you do go, there are two options out there. There's Crazy House Customs has a shock bucket replacement. You have to cut it off and put theirs on there, or do the cambered. Now, we've heard that the cambered system is a little bit easier to install than the Crazy House Customs kit, so keep that in mind. You will need to include that in your installation. Because the Gen 1 kit is so new and the market is so small, you will need to figure out where to mount your ECU. The ECU that goes in the engine bay, you'll need to figure out a mount solution for that, as well as how to mount the controller in the dash. SDI currently does not have a mount solution for those because, again, the market is so small. All right, so that is it, guys. As promised, we have partnered with Hammer Built to offer you guys deals on all the stuff we recommend here. Before we get into the offer, I want to be transparent. I've always struggled with how to monetize this channel. I want to stay biased without my opinion being impacted. We haven't done sponsored videos in a long time on this channel. Everything you've seen here, it's because it's the stuff that I'm passionate about, it's stuff that I'm trying. And at the same token, though, it's expensive and time-consuming to, work on the truck on your own, to upgrade the camera gear. Camera gear got really expensive. Organize the runs, all the times editing these videos. At that same token, I don't want to do what other channels do, right? Some other channels offer subscriptions for early access to videos. They offer paid runs, and it's not something that I want to do, right? If it's not something that I'm willing to pay for, I don't expect you guys to do it either. But I also spend a lot of time on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube here, giving folks advice on their build. So if you guys have any questions on your build, anything related to Raptors, by all means, shoot me a DM on Instagram or shoot me an email, and I'm helping guys every day with their builds, answering questions. And the reason I do this is because I got so much bad advice early on when I was building my truck from the Facebook groups and all that stuff. And I still see it today, and I cringe every time I see it, but there's too many people out there that don't work on their trucks giving out advice with no real experience. A lot of these guys that just pay shops to do everything and telling you how to do things, and there's a lot of bad advice. So how do I monetize that, right? So we partnered with Hammer Built to offer a different way for us to monetize all that advice and everything that I do. And if you guys end up buying from me, I get a little bit of commission from Hammer Built when I make the sales. Reason I partnered with Hammer Built is because we believe in building relationships through testing and teaching. Together, we're bringing you the brutally honest, non-biased advice based on our experiences without all the noise you get from all the forums. So with that, we do have an offer for you guys. For Keep It Dirty Off-Road followers, we're offering an early Black Friday deal. Starting Veterans Day, today, Friday, November 10th, if you use code KIDDOSDI, the first 10 to order an SDI E-Click package will get 10% off from Hammer Built. That's any E-Click package, even if you just get the E-Click system alone, or you add the top hat, the light control, or the SDI tune, you will get 10% off your whole SDI package from Hammer Built. If you're looking for the top hat replacement alone to replace your springs or to prevent the issues that we outlined in this video, we also have 10% off SDI top hat to the first 10 orders that order those on its own. Don't wait to place your order today because the 10 slots are gonna go quick. If you happen to watch this video after, Hammer Built's always looking to give folks deals on the solutions. So shoot me a message, shoot me a DM, let me know about your build and what you want to do with it, and we'll try to do the best we can on these deals. Because again, I'm here to help help everybody, try to hook you guys up with better deals that are out there and make a little bit of commission in the process. keepitdirtyoffroad@gmail.com, or if you want a little bit quicker response, do it over Instagram. Shoot me a direct message over Instagram at keepitdirty_offroad. Ask me whatever you guys want. It doesn't matter if it's E-Click related, if it's Raptor related, whatever, right? I'm here to help you guys out. There's a lot of bad info out there, and if you just want to have see if something passes the sniff test, shoot me a direct message. I'm always willing to help. I help guys every day answering their questions. There's no pressure to buy, so you don't have to buy something from me to get advice. I'm just here to help, share all of our experiences and our lessons learned. Majority of them we learned the hard way so that you guys don't have to face them. All right, guys, that's it for this video. Hopefully this video helped you plan your next Raptor upgrade. Hope you guys learned something. Hope it inspires you guys. Put any questions or comments below. Please consider subscribing, and thank you for watching.